Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The Speaker of the House announced today the House will vote to establish a new select committee on Benghazi. Also today, the House Oversight Committee subpoenaed Secretary of State John Kerry. Two very aggressive and very rare moves that signal House Republicans are not abandoning their obsession with tying the White House to the attacks in Benghazi. On the contrary, it looks like they are just getting started. Today, John Boehner tweeted out the announcement of a select committee with this very slick graphic you are looking at right now. And if you look at this graphic carefully, if you look closely at it, it embodies everything about the not one but two Benghazis that exist. You see, there is the real Benghazi, a city in the north of Libya, east of Tripoli, a city of over 600,000 people, the site of an American consulate, the place where an attack on September 11th, 2012 took the lives of 4 Americans, a place of turmoil and violence. That is the real Benghazi. That Benghazi is appropriately enough in the background of this graphic. That embassy burning is in the background because that's the real Benghazi. The other Benghazi is #Benghazi. #Benghazi is the world of online conspiracy theorists, Twitter trolls, and Facebook right-wingers. #Benghazi isn't a real place where real people died horrible deaths. It's the alternate universe of endless conspiracy theorizing and propaganda that has sucked the entire right-wing media into a paranoid vortex. And it's represented on the speaker's graphic by the fake breaking news banner that is there for no reason, this graphic, and the speaker.gov. #Benghazi is where you can find tweets about how Hillary Clinton has buckets of blood on her hands. The White House sends more personnel to the Bundy Ranch over cows than they did to Benghazi. It's the place where people think that a White House communications advisor looking at White House talking points is the next Watergate. #Benghazi isn't just online, it's an entire industry, an entire imaginary realm. It's where, for instance, Lindsey Graham has actually been living for the past year.
This is not a Fox News story. This is an American story. I'm not satisfied with having the executive branch tell me what happened in Benghazi.
Scumbags are the people in the White House who lied about this.
We're just starting on Benghazi.
#Benghazi is the alternate Fox News universe where there is only one thing going on in the world, and it is Benghazi.
All right, we were waiting for others to ask questions. We know that the next question that's coming up is from a German reporter. We are not anticipating that that would be about the situation with Benghazi, which is breaking news since the president has been talking, really. So if, in fact, somebody throws him a question on this topic, we'll go back to that joint news conference.
That's Fox breaking away from a live press conference of the president because no one had asked a Benghazi question, and they weren't anticipating a Benghazi question, but they'll go back to it when and if there is a Benghazi question. The existence of #Benghazi doesn't mean, and this is really important, doesn't mean that there isn't still a real Benghazi, a real place where real policy failures happened, where real people lost their lives horrifically, a place where the intelligence was not good and diplomatic security was terrible. But of course, if the politicians who spend so much time hyping #Benghazi actually cared about real Benghazi, well, then they wouldn't have voted to cut the budget for diplomatic security in places like the real Benghazi. The most insidious aspect of #Benghazi is that if you express the warranted contempt for the absolute hysteria that surrounds the topic, the people, the denizens of #Benghazi, will accuse you of disrespecting the memory of 4 Americans who died in actual Benghazi. It's exactly what they did to Hillary Clinton last year when she grew frustrated when a senator insisted that members of the administration had intentionally misled the American people.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again.
Clinton was painted by the right-wing media as spitting on the grave of 4 Americans.
Lying to the American people for 2 consecutive weeks. Now, forgive me, but I'm willing to bet that it makes a difference to the families of the 4 dead Americans.
That same routine is being played out again, only this time it's happening to former National Security Council spokesman Tommy Vietor. Yesterday, Vietor appeared on Fox News with Bret Baier. Baier wanted to know if Vietor edited the White House talking points on Benghazi. Keep in mind, Vietor is in his role probably wrote and changed thousands of talking points.
Did you also change attacks to demonstrations in the talking points?
Maybe. I don't really remember.
You don't remember?
Dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane
it is the thing
process
that everybody is talking about.
The frustration in his voice here, the incredulous dude there, that is directed at Bret Baier. That is directed at hashtag Benghazi. But of course, predictably, the people who inhabit the world of hashtag Benghazi exploded in dramatic outrage.
But he doesn't understand, he actually does understand that when you change talking points after an ambassador's killed, 3 other people are dead in a major military operation led by the United States, then that is huge. 4 Americans' lives were brutally, savagely taken. They were killed.
I think Tommy Vitor understands that 4 people were brutally murdered in the real Benghazi. And that is exactly why he, like many others, are sick of dealing with hashtag Benghazi. They are tired of dealing with people who seem to care less about what actually happened in Benghazi than how they can use the deaths of 4 Americans to make Hillary Clinton and the White House look bad. Joining me now is Tommy Vitor, former national security spokesman for President Obama. Tommy, first I should get you to respond to the reaction to your interview yesterday. Were you saying, dude, that was 2 years ago about what happened there, or about the question pertaining to whether you edited some talking points?
Yeah, I mean, Brett was asking me to remember what if I changed a word on September 14th, 2012. And my frustration came through, I guess you're only supposed to speak the Queen's English on Fox. But obviously what happened that day was an absolute tragedy. And what I wish we talked more about on Fox and everywhere else is what we're doing to make sure it never, ever happens again, like you discussed.
Yes, well, that seems to be absent because as far as I can tell, the obsessive coverage of this in the right-wing media is about hurting Hillary Clinton's chances in 2016, frankly, and because they have worked themselves up into believing that there was some massive cover-up to essentially quash, I don't know what, it keeps changing, to make the president look good. Was there a massive cover-up?
No, there was not. And yet no one has explained to me what it was that was covered up. But what I do know is that Fox News and right-wing radio has constructed this alternate reality where Barack Obama watched video drone footage of the incident as it happened, where the CIA was told to stand down, where the military could have come to their rescue and didn't because some choice was made not to. All of those things have been debunked in the real world, but in the Fox News hashtag Benghazi world, these are things people still believe. So of course people on Twitter or listening to these shows are incensed about it because they've been fed this fake reality created by Fox News and these other outlets that in no way mirrors what actually happened that day.
4 years or 2 years, I guess, after this happened, are we in a better shape in both in Libya or around the world in protecting embassies? I mean, it seems to me there's been zero policy discussion about how it went down, zero policy discussion about the actual intelligence failures that may or may not have happened, and zero policy discussion of how we protect our embassies.
So in the wake of the series of protests that were the result of the Innocence of Muslim videos, we had twice daily meetings about embassy security, and people asked really, really hard questions about are certain facilities in Pakistan or Yemen or Sudan in truly, truly dangerous places secure enough for our diplomats, and changes were made. But at the end of the day, Chris, it really does boil down to the fact that these are brave people serving in dangerous places, and there is some risk inherent to it. But it still doesn't change my frustration from the fact that we're still talking about talking points. I mean, there's not a select committee on Condi Rice's Sunday show Prep Call where she said a smoking gun could become a mushroom cloud. And clearly that had a far bigger impact on our nation's national security than Susan Rice's comments after Benghazi already occurred.
How far are they going to go with this?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I have some close Republican friends who say to me, they're sick of this. They're sick of repealing health care, but they need to gin up something against Obama to keep the crazy Tea Party people from ginning up stuff against the leadership in the House or in the Senate. And, they're candid with me about this, and I understand it, but it's cynical and it's disgusting.
Former National Security Council spokesman Tommy Vitor, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Joining me now is Eric Boehlert, senior fellow at Media Matters. And I have to, at a certain point, I don't know, you sort of tip your cap out of kind of perverse respect that they just will not let anything stop them from keeping this truck going. I mean, it was the lead on every Fox show. It was the lead of. I mean, it was yesterday in the right-wing media. If you're not imbibing it to the extent that I am, it was the only story in America that mattered for the last 2 days.
Yes, and if we went back to May of 2003, we were in the exact same pattern, right? When we were talking about emails from the White House in Benghazi and a cover-up.
Yes, it was exactly a year ago.
Exactly. 50 weeks ago. And so after that passed, after it blew up, after it was debunked, after we realized those emails were altered.
There was basically hearsay of someone saying what was in emails that was leaked, that at first looked incriminating. Then they released the actual emails, and they were not incriminating at all.
No cover-up whatsoever.
We have gone through this pattern, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 times in this story?
Oh, at least. And you think about where Fox News was 10 days ago. They were humiliated with this Cliven Bundy fiasco where they had gone all in on a racist rancher. So they don't like playing defense, they like playing offense. You know, this is a perfect example of the synergy of Fox and Up on the Hill and they're on Judicial Watch, and they're all churning the same stuff, and they all get everyone excited, and here we are again. Look, if they want to know what happened, why don't they, you know, they formed this select committee, why don't they read the Senate Select Committee that was released in January? No White House cover-up. There was no specific threat that was ignored.
Senate Select Committee.
There was no stand-down order. There was ties to the video, et cetera, et cetera. The House is saying we had 20 months of this. We've had hearings. We've spent millions. Let's start all over. Because we can't find what we want to find.
As a media watchdog, I saw this everywhere on the right yesterday. This is a tweet. Read this closely. Coincidence? Hashtag Benghazi cover. This is from Heritage Foundation. CBS Evening News fails to cover the latest Benghazi developments. It identifies Ben Rhodes, who's White House Deputy National Security Advisor. David Rhodes, his brother, is CBS News president. So isn't this the smoking gun of a huge media conspiracy?
Right. So let's go back to last fall. Where was CBS in terms of Benghazi? They admitted they had their biggest embarrassment in a decade because they went with this right-wing Benghazi report. So
whose story was totally debunked.
Right.
They put a huge amount of their 60 minutes into it, and the guy who oversaw that is David Rhodes.
Right. So how can CBS be covering up for the White House in Benghazi now if CBS went out on a limb and embarrassed itself, humiliated itself by sort of echoing these right-wing charges about Benghazi? You can't have it both ways.
Also, David Rhodes. Do you know where David Rhodes, America, worked before CBS for 15 years? He worked at Fox News.
Well, that's right. That's right. Of course.
That is where David Rhodes worked. So if you think he is pulling the strings, but it really is. It does remind me of in a worrying way, it reminds me of late Clinton years. It reminds me of Clinton years, 97, 98, when it was just like they'd been pulling at threads for so long, and they kind of lost the plot themselves about what the scandal was. It's like, was it cattle futures or Whitewater, or was it? Where was it? And then they ended up with an impeachment trial.
And then they dumped it all in Ken Starr's lap. Here, the GOP does not have that independent counsel, that $40 million budget, just to vacuum all this stuff up. So they have to do it piecemeal. And again, with the House, they did it piecemeal, and they decided we haven't gone anywhere. Let's start all over. And then, of course, Fox is hitting this all the time.
Eric Boehlert from Media Matters, thank you. You'll never guess what I was doing on Wednesday. Why did I spend my morning testing out a potentially game-changing new gun? And what does that gun have to do with one of the most talked about stories in the country today? I'll explain ahead.